I'd like to call the May 9th, 2023 Board of Commissioners work session to order. As always, we will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, and this evening, one of our residents, Linda Smith, will lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Linda. Deanna, will you do the roll call?
Denise Hall, President.
Here.
Catherine Carter, Vice President.
Here.
Liz McNaney, Commissioner.
Here.
Martha Similaro, Commissioner.
Here.
Ruth Damsker, Commissioner.
Here.
Sandra Zedell, Township Manager.
Here.
Megan Weaver, Assistant Township Manager.
Here.
Lauren Gallagher, Township Solicitor.
Here.
Nicholas Cross, Township Engineer.
Here.
David Duffy, Chief of Police.
Here.
Nathan Crittenden, Finance Director.
Here.
Van Reeker, Zoning Officer.
Here.
Thank you, Deanna. Lauren, were there any executive sessions?
There were. The board met in executive session on May 4th to discuss items of personnel.
Thank you, Lauren. At our May business meeting, we will be honoring our Chief of Police for 15 years of service to Upper Gwynedd Township. We will also be at our May business meeting honoring one of our residents, Elisa Simrak, for achieving the Girl Scout Gold Award. And in honor of Asian Pacific American Heritage Month, George Cho of the Jason Center will make a presentation. Next, we have the public comments. Please state your name and if you are a resident or non-resident when you come to the mic. Thank you for respecting the 5-minute rule and practicing decorum. Our goal is always to give you the most complete and correct answers to your questions from our staff who are experts in each of these areas. For that reason, you have the option of enclosing your email address in the registry if you would like us to reach out to you during the week with the full answer to your questions. We had some residents who were concerned that if we answered any question offline, so to speak, then the residents who wanted to hear the answer publicly would be left out. So we will continue to share the answers to questions that were posed publicly but answered privately at the following public meeting. First up for public comment this evening is Carl Smith.
Yes, good evening. Carl Smith, 815 McIntosh Way. So tonight I'd like to respond to some observations Catherine Carter made at the end of our last meeting we attended last month. And she mentioned the fact that there's a high degree of emotion or anger in the community. And I can give you a little bit of feedback, I think, from a local grassroots perspective. Several of you on the board ran your campaigns on a platform that you wanted to preserve open space. And I think, if I recall, you used the Martin Track as an example of how you're going to do that. Martin Track being the property on the corner of Allentown and Broad Street. And I was not aware politically when it came to local issues at the time, but I was working the polls, and I did hear a lot of people come up to me and ask me about that issue. So, you know, because I wasn't aware, I wasn't able to help them, but from an anecdotal standpoint, it seems you had some support in the community, even bipartisan support in that effort, even though they didn't know the details. But what's happened since you got elected, I guess, is more the issue and the question. It seems to be the focus now is to focus on changing the zoning in our light industrial areas to accommodate this high density, what you call affordable housing. And the only explanation I can come up with is that it fits your party's definition or the national agenda of your Democratic Party of and your worldview of what is equitable. Well, there's some people that disagree with that viewpoint, and that's what I guess we've been discussing over the last months. We've also been watching how the board treated our fellow citizens, the Martins. And because they didn't cooperate at a level, I guess, you felt they should, the next step in your book was to go ahead and condemn the property or the building, and then by eminent domain, try to take control of the property. And when I asked off the record Ruth Damsker about this, the response was, hey, they don't live in the township any longer, and they've made plenty of money. Both of those things may be true, but what that does is the takeaway is that, hey, at any point, any one of us as citizens, if we're on the wrong side of the power base, could find ourselves in a position where we're going to be forfeiting our personal property rights. So that does make people upset when they see things like that. For the past year, we've been stonewalled when it comes to this issue about the Walters Group and your affiliation with that group. And that you have told us there is no connection, no affiliation, no cooperation. But then we find a letter from their attorney, Joe Clement, in black and white, says he has your support. And you continue to publicly deny that. And he tried to do that last month, but it's in black and white. So I'm not buying it. And this process is moving forward. And then when we hear the Walters Group come in and use terms, we've got to get reacquainted with it. Well, not reacquainted with the new centralizing poverty. What does that mean to us? Does that mean we're going to be bringing poverty out of pockets that it's in that we all recognize and spreading it out here in our community? Is that what this is all about? We're also told that this term subsidized housing, we're uninformed on that. It's not what we. Well, I've got news for you. Anytime the tenant does not pay the full market rate and the extra is picked up either directly or indirectly, that is a subsidy no matter how you slice it. And you're not going to sell those of us who know the difference. Sorry about that. Thanks for telling me that. So anyway, we're not buying the fact this is an unsubsidized housing project. We believe it is subsidized, even though you're telling us. So that gets us upset when we hear things like that, that is an affront to our senses. And of course, when we challenge this, we are greeted with the same tried and true methods from the left as we saw last month. We are labeled and we're called names. And the top three that you like to use are racist, bigot, and a homophobe. And last month, your Democrat candidate for commissioner came in here and called us racist simply because we're registering our dissent on how you're approaching this issue. So there's anger. I think it's predictable anger when it comes to these issues. You've sown seeds of dissent.
Hey, Carl, can you wrap it up? That was 5 minutes.
Yes, I'm wrapping it up now. In
Thank
fact, you know, when you try to pit citizens against each other and claim the moral high ground by marginalizing your opposition just because we're not aligned with you politically. So I'm wrapped up. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. Next up, we have Linda Smith.
Hello. I just have a couple questions before I start. I see that the meetings for the board, the public workshop meetings have been canceled in June, July, and August. Is that correct?
Yes.
So how is the public going to know what you're going to be voting on at the business meeting?
Well, we will publish it online, the agenda. We just consolidated it into one meeting for the month.
Okay.
The summer, I mean. for
Summer,
June,
okay.
July, and August. It's just temporary. We're just trying it out to see if we can do more in the one meeting, so we don't have to meet twice because it's the summer and more
Gotcha.
people are.
And do you publish the planning committee meeting agendas online? The planning
Planning
committee?
Commission?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So last month we heard about the Walters Group project, and we learned a lot about it. And I'm still questioning who it's really going to benefit in Upper Gwynedd Township. It just seems like it's not in the best interest of the residents for several reasons. It's defined as the deconcentration of poverty at the expense of the citizens of Upper Gwynedd Township. So I'm not sure how the commissioners here could support that type of project, since you're supposed to be looking out for the township residents. Do you think that the current residents and voters of the township voted you into office to address the housing needs of Norristown, Pottstown, and Philadelphia? I mean, we're in Upper Gwynedd, and this needs to be led by the county and the county Democratic leadership. And you're doing the exact opposite of what residents of Upper Gwynedd Township surveyed in the 2040 comprehensive plan want for our township. It will no longer be a good to excellent place to live if we go along with the Montgomery County's plan to urbanize the suburbs. And wondering if you can comprehend the relationship between density and urbanization and the ultimate results of higher crime, failing schools, and the stress on infrastructure. And we're already 90% built out, and we have all types of housing in Upper Gwynedd. At the meeting on April 18th, there was a comment concerning about the shortage of affordable housing in Upper Gwynedd. And Upper Gwynedd has satisfied the Fair Housing Act. And I'm going to repeat what I said at the meeting earlier about the housing in Upper Gwynedd. On page 32 of the comprehensive plan, it gives a breakdown of the overall housing types in Upper Gwynedd. We have 47% single family, 23.2% single family attached, 28.8% multifamily, 4% 2 to 4 unit apartment buildings, 4.7% 5 to 9 unit apartment buildings, 0.6% mobile homes, and 20% 10 plus unit apartment buildings. So our housing stock is very diverse, with 1 in every 5 dwellings being apartments. So as I mentioned earlier, this nonsense pushed by the county Democrats without regard for the best interests of a community. And as elected public servants of Upper Gwynedd, and you are elected and you are public servants, you've allowed yourselves to be caught on the county's fishing hook. And in Upper Gwynedd, we don't have to necessarily follow what the county wants. We're Upper Gwynedd, we're a township, we are our own township, and we need to make our own decisions. And to be forced into this, or to be coerced into this, or be told the grant money would be held up, or whatever we were told from the county, is not right. And so, as much as we've heard about the Walters Group project, it makes me even more against it. So I just want to put that opinion out there, and I've had many other people express that opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Next up, we have Mark Connolly.
Good evening, Mark Connolly, 11 Carney Drive. So I wanted to talk about some of the terms that I've heard used in testimony over the past couple of months, and try to see if I understand, kind of what we're talking about. So when we're talking about this Pembroke Parkway project, one of the terms I continually hear is that there's a potential for urbanization. Now, it's not my word, so I don't really know what it means, but I kind of did the thought exercise of, okay, what would the criteria be for me to consider something urbanization? So the first thing I looked at is population density. So Upper Gwynedd Township, we have 2,101.4 people per square mile. If this development were to be built and it were at full capacity, so 212 people, we would be going from 2,101.4 to 2,128.6 people per square miles. So it's less than 30 increase. Now, it's not that big of an increase, but especially when you consider the fact that, Plymouth Township, East Norton Township, Montgomery Township, they all have higher population densities. Montgomery Township is almost 300 higher than even if this project were built. If you look at West Norton, Springfield, Montgomery, Upper Moreland, Abingdon, Cheltenham, Lansdale, Philadelphia, a whole lot of other places, many of those places have population densities that are significantly higher than even if we built a large number of these, which I'm not advocating. So I guess when I hear, people saying, oh, well, this is an urbanization, when we talk about Lansdale has 6,272 people per square mile, so that's almost 3 times as many. So, whereas we're increasing this by potentially 30. And looking at some of the other characteristics here, if we're talking about impervious space, when I think about a development that's urbanization, I think about, a lot of sidewalks, a lot of cement, right? I don't think about green spaces. And I did a GIS analysis on Gwynedd Club, where I live, and on this proposed development. And I believe that, if you look at basically the sketch that they did, and you take anything that's basically green or teal or blue, you're talking about somewhere around 60% green space in this proposed development. And in my own development, it's probably closer to 55%. So this is potentially either about the same green space as Gwynedd Club or higher. And keep in mind that, when I look at my backyard, I see deer, I see nature, I see life. So I think that, when we think about this, if we're thinking about something that would get built in Philadelphia, we would think a lot more cement, you wouldn't see nature. And this is even more so than what we have now in Gwynedd Club. And just looking at a couple of the other metrics here, we're looking at, units per acre. It's almost identical between Gwynedd Club and this proposed development. Both of them hover around 11 units per acre. If we look at street parking, for example, if you think about an urban development, you think about reliance on street grids, so perpendicular 90-degree angles. You think about needing street parking in order to accommodate parking needs. And this development, when you look at, for example, the street grid inside the development, it's not an urban street grid. It is, curves. You're not talking here about something like Lansdale where, again, you have 90-degree angles. And this development does not rely on street parking. I believe they said something like 1.8 parking spots per unit, which is slightly lower than Gwynedd Club, but if you drive through Gwynedd Club, you'll see that we have plenty of parking at 2. And I believe that Gwynedd Club, I think more of our units are 2 and 3 bedrooms than this proposed. Other things we talk about here, is train access, something that we would consider urban. And I would argue, North Penn School District is named after a train, right? The North Penn Railroad is what we now call the SEPTA line, right? So the train is so fundamental to our identity as a school district that I think, ultimately having train access and having the ability to ride trains, I think is core to our identity as, North Penn residents. And, Chief Duffy already talked about crime as well, that we're not seeing, a potential increase in crime because of this. So when I look at all these criteria, I don't see an urban development. I see something that's fairly suburban, that's consistent with what we've built in the past. So, I would argue here, if this does constitute urbanization, I would certainly encourage people to explain what criteria they're using to say that this is an urban development. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Next up, we have BJ Brush. You can correct me.
BJ Bryce, yes, thank you.
Brush. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Commissioner and Commissioners, for allowing me to speak tonight. My name is BJ Bryce. I'm from Lansdale Borough, so I'm not a resident of Upper Gwynedd, but I do appreciate the opportunity to speak tonight. I am here to speak in regards to the Pembroke Parkway conversation, specifically in regards to the affordable housing options for our communities. Even though I don't live in Upper Gwynedd, when I look out my back window, it's almost as if this project were to be right in my backyard, because I look out over the park and then this project would be right on the other side of that. So as you know, the cost of housing has been rising steadily in recent years. This has made it increasingly difficult for many people to afford to live in Upper Gwynedd. In fact, the median home price in Upper Gwynedd is now well over $300,000, and median rent exceeds $1,700. This is out of reach for many families, especially those with young children. There are a number of reasons why more affordable housing options are important. First, it provides families and individuals with a sense of stability and security. When you have a safe and affordable place to live, you can focus on your family, your job, your health, and your future. Affordable housing options can also help strengthen communities. The increasing cost of home ownership and rent is pricing out many families that are already living in our communities or wish they could. These are our school teachers, service industry workers, caretakers, volunteer firefighters, daycare workers, and families with young children. When these households are cost burdened, they are forced to make impossible decisions. Placing nutritious food on the table, providing a great education for your children, and having a safe place to call home. We should not have to choose from these things, but sadly, this is a daily reality for many, and it's certainly not due to lack of trying. These families and individuals have worked hard and still come up short, not because of their own efforts, but because of systemic issues, an inequitable economy, and failed policy. I believe that everyone deserves the opportunity to live in a safe and affordable home, and locally we have the responsibility to act to make sure that happens. That's why I'm calling on both our communities, Lansdale Borough and Upper Gwynedd Township, to take action to make affordable housing a reality for more families where we can. There are a number of things that our local elected leaders can do to make affordable housing a reality, such as provide tax breaks and other incentives to developers who build affordable housing, create zoning ordinance that encourage the development of affordable housing, provide financial assistance to help families afford housing. Sadly, there is also a vocal group of people who are opposed to the development of affordable housing. This behavior is commonly referred to as NIMBYism, which stands for not in my backyard. NIMBYs often argue that affordable housing will lead to increased crime, traffic, and a decrease in property values. However, there is no evidence to support these claims. In fact, studies have shown that affordable housing is actually correlated with a decrease in crime and increase in property values. I urge you to join me by opposing not in my backyard by saying yes, in my backyard. Together, we can make our community a more welcoming and inclusive place for everyone. Everyone deserves to build the foundation for a stable, healthy future for themselves and their families, no matter who they are, where they live, or how much money they earn. Together, we can break the cycle of poverty, prevent homelessness, and empower families and individuals throughout our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, BJ. Did anyone else want to make a comment tonight who came in late and wasn't able to register? No? Oh.
Thank you. Appreciate the
Hi.
invitation.
Would you mind spelling your name for us? since you're
Sure.
on it?
Sheldon, Sheldon. Last name is Good, Good. No E on the end. All right. I also, like Mr. Bryce, live in Lansdale Borough
Okay.
and can see Pembroke Station from practically from my house. I lived in Lansdale for 5 years, worked for most of my career in affordable housing and ending homelessness and other social services. I don't want to take too much of your time. I simply want to echo and second everything Mr. Bryce said. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheldon. Anyone else? Okay. Moving on. Oh, I'm going to turn the meeting over to our manager, Sandra Zadell.
Thank you, President Hull. So I would like to talk first in my manager's report about something that probably most residents aren't familiar with, but has been a huge success for us. Whoa. Oh, you know what? Is that microphone still? Can you hit that microphone? Thank you. Hopefully, oh, nope, it's still bad. Okay. I don't want to tell you this while it's crazy. No, his is off.
You want to turn yours off?
Is that better? How about now? That is better. Am I good? I think I'm good. So I'm not hearing anything from the IT department. Okay, so most residents don't even know what sludge hauling is, maybe. It's an important process that occurs at our wastewater treatment plant that we spend quite a bit of money on each year. And I'd like to compliment my wastewater team for the amazing job they've done over the first quarter of this year. So they've been working very hard to reduce the costs for the sludge hauling. And actually, it resulted in over $37,000 in savings in the first quarter, which is very significant. They did this through all the sciencey things that they do down at wastewater. They had to work with our lab. They worked to make our sludge thicker so that we're hauling less water and actually hauling more waste, which then reduced our costs. And I don't know that there's really anyone on that team that didn't help with that process. So I wanted to give a compliment publicly to our wastewater team and especially to our wastewater director, Dan Ferris, and also Bill Smith, who works in our lab. They really dedicated themselves to this. And as I mentioned, it's $37,000 the first quarter. We still have 3 more quarters of the year to go. And that's some serious savings for our ratepayers in the wastewater department. So I wanted to give that compliment publicly for that department. Oh, that's exciting.
I know they're not here, but
They're not here, but maybe they'll watch the clip. And that's all I had for my manager's report. And I'd like to turn it over to E. Van Rieker.
This I can do. Good evening, everyone. Okay, planning and zoning. Some of these you've heard before, but they're ongoing and we'll touch them quickly. 1601 Valley Forge Road, the Wawa, has been heard. There were 4 hearings in front of the zoning hearing board. The board is now waiting for findings of fact and recommended conclusions of law, which will be considered by the zoning hearing board. And I believe a decision is tentatively scheduled for the next zoning hearing, which is May 23rd. We'll announce it. We really aren't going to know until that night, but the idea is that the board would be ready and able to render a decision on the zoning hearing board special exception application for the Wawa. questions on that one? I know that's been around for a while. You've heard me talk about that, but okay. And as a part of that, there also was a variance, a dimensional variance for signs. So that would be a concomitant part of the zoning decision.
Van, is that the variance that was withdrawn?
No, Catherine, actually, there was another variance withdrawn a number of months ago. That was a request to reduce the amount of green space within the parking lot. We were uncomfortable with that. Wawa re-evaluated the plan and redesigning it. They were able to come up with a plan that did not require the variance for the green space within the parking area. So that is not being considered because that was withdrawn a number of months ago. But the sign package is still before the board, as is the service part of providing gas, basically. Secondly, and kind of a companion case is ZHB 2306. That was an appeal that was created by me at the request of the owners of the Wawa property. And it has to do with parking, illegal parking on their property by a neighbor. I entered into a cease and desist. The applicants have appealed it, and they've also appealed the idea of the adverse possession issue for parking before the Court of Common Pleas. So that's being held in abeyance till June 27th. I know it's complicated, but it basically means that the neighbor believes that he's entitled to park on that property, and he's asked for an adjudication from the Common Pleas Court. At our solicitor's recommendation, we have held in abeyance any decision by the Zoning Hearing Board until the court either resolves that issue or until it's settled. Questions on that one? Okay. The next group are more straightforward Zoning Hearing Board applications. 08, the Church Road. This was the special exception to allow for another use at 201 Church Road. That was approved with conditions having to do with maintaining internal operations, not storing outside, and hours of operation. So this is the former Lansdale Business School. Then it was a church, and now it's owned by Volpe, and Volpe has evolved the property back into LI uses. It's where the new Little Sprouts is proposed, for those of you that are wondering where this site is. So that was approved by the Zoning Hearing Board. 983 Allentown Road, Bridge Community Church, a variance was approved to install a shed closer than the required 100-foot setback from a residential zone, again with conditions relative to buffering and dealing with stormwater management. The next 2310 Dickerson Road had to do with kind of an acquired variance. It was a non-conforming use. Applicant had constructed a roof over a pre-existing patio, and as well as asked for a dimensional variance for a gazebo. That was approved, recognizing that there were some conditions that would be necessary to appease the most immediate neighbor. Applicant agreed to do that. Next is 2311. That was actually an application on behalf of Upper Gwynedd, by Upper Gwynedd, represented by the Park and Recreation Director, to replace the current LED sign with a new sign and to increase the number of colors that were believed to be effective on that sign. The sign exists. It's going to be a new panel board, same place, same location. There were some dimensional questions relative to the initial permit that was issued some 15 years ago. I asked that they be resolved by the Zoning Hearing Board. They were. Zoning Hearing Board voted to approve that application. That sign exists. It's just going to be clearer and easier to see with the new LED changeable copy sign. Any questions on that one? Okay. Next, 402 Sweetsford, that was 2312, a height variance to a large property 3.5 acres, somewhat isolated, wanted a height variance to install a detached garage on that property. That was approved. Next, 1500 Pembroke Parkway. That is being probably the idea is it would be scheduled for the June 14th agenda of the Planning Commission. All of you in attendance are invited. Neighbors will be notified. The idea is that we'll have a draft. We will have reviewed the draft, fine-tuned the draft for the TOD2, it's called, the Transit Overlay District 2. And that will be heard, we expect, at the next Planning Commission meeting. Check online. Anyone who wants to know for sure, call me. I'll alert you as to whether or not it is scheduled. I believe it's going to be on the June 14th agenda, for those of you that have been following that along. And that's a text amendment to the LI district. Next are 5 new ZHBs, all to be heard in 2 weeks, the evening of May 23rd, the first at 712 Talmadge Avenue. Height variance, very similar to the variance that was considered by the board at 402 Sweetford last month. Large detached garage on a large property. It would exceed the height variance by about 2 feet. That's going to be sought. All of these are going to be heard May 23rd. 1249 Scobie, variance to permit a deck within the required rear yard. You've heard me say this before, but for those of you that are sort of new to this issue, in Upper Gwynedd, an attached edifice such as a shed or a patio or a gazebo, when attached to the principal building, is treated like the principal building relative to required dimensional yard setbacks. So when that happens, and it happens frequently, and some lots are shaped in such a way that they can't accommodate the greater setback, a dimensional variance is sought. I would say probably half of the variances the zoning hearing board considers in a year are these kinds of dimensional variances in side or rear yards. This will be one of them, 1249 Scobie. Next, 203 Church. This is actually sort of a different type of numerous dimensional variances to accommodate. So this is the old Triumph building, for those of you that are following along, 203 Church Road. It's now vacant, and it has been vacant for a number of years. It has been acquired by a new developer who would like to build warehouses. That's their proposal, is to build warehouses. In order to accomplish their plan, they requested for some dimensional relief relative to setbacks from the residential district, setbacks from a driveway setback from a residential district, and a variance to allow a minimal amount of parking spaces. Our ordinance is somewhat unusual in that it is crafted in such a way as to generate the most amount of parking that one could consider for a particular use, and is not designed to accommodate special kinds of uses. So the applicant will request in this case, because it's a warehouse, be used for warehousing purposes only, a reduction in the amount of parking spaces that are necessary and or required to operate on that property. The other two are dimensional in nature. It'll be their job to explain to the zoning hearing board why that relief ought to be granted. Is there questions on that application? Okay, and then if approved, that would result in a new development of, I think it's over 200,000 square feet of new warehouse operations in the LI district. Off of Church Road.
Dan,
Yes.
do we get to know what they're going to use the warehouse for, or that's not part of?
It's not a part of this. I mean, they would be restricted to, it can't operate as a truck terminal. They're permitted to exchange and store all the uses that are allowed in the LI district. Fire marshal will inspect all the occupants to make sure that they're operating in a safe fashion. That hasn't happened yet. In order to get to the land development phase, they are first asked for these dimensional variances. And then finally, 1258 Jarvis Lane, just behind Scobie. In fact, it's one lot behind Scobie over there in that part of the township. Same issue. The applicants would like to construct a screened-in porch. They have a patio. They want to extend it. In order to do that, they would have extended into the required rear yard. So that's a dimensional variance to permit an attached roofed porch area within the rear yard. Okay, sorry to take so much time. I think I was at less than 5 minutes. I didn't try to rush. Are there
You did that
questions?
faster than ever
Are there
humanly
questions?
possible by you with that many things on your report.
I can't
Good
talk
job.
any quicker, I don't think. The questions? Okay, thank you. Oh, who has it?
Actually, my question isn't for you, but you talked about it.
Oh, I'll try if I
I
can.
had some questions, actually. We have the representative from the Walters Group with us tonight.
Okay.
And you had brought that up, so I was going to ask some questions about that, but to preference my questions a little bit, a lot of residents have reached out to us about the Pembroke Parkway, the Walters Group development. I've had several meetings, and I'm sure the other board members too have been asked a lot of questions. I had a 4-hour meeting with 2 residents, and it was absolutely wonderful. It was fantastic. We met at the Royal Farms right up the road here. A great place to meet, have coffee, supporting a local business. And I met with some other people as well. We have a meeting tomorrow too at 1 with another issue. So residents are reaching out to us a lot, and we encourage that. If they don't want to come here and speak, then certainly reach out and we will schedule to meet with you. So one of the questions is for the Walters Group was, if they leave the property and they just abandon and they say, nope, after 5 years of it being that way, what happens to it?
Let me answer the first part, and if you want, I see a Walters representative is here, perhaps she's able to step in. So the way I have approached this from the beginning, it's irrelevant to me from a land planning standpoint that it's a Walters application or that it's a Lynn Pro property or that it's WB Homes. So for me, it's always been, how would you design, what is the appropriate use for this now approximately 6-acre property for residential? It so happens, and it's an important happening, that the applicant has been the Walters Group. They specialize in providing a special type of housing that appeals, and I'll say it's affordable because I'm not afraid of that word. It's affordable housing, and they have a mechanism to create that affordability. The architecture, the land planning, the landscaping, the parking, all of those other regulations that apply to Station Square, now the Pembroke Apartments, are applicable. But nothing is going to change. We're not reducing the nature of the standard for this development. It's a smaller property. So we believe we have to accommodate, if we're interested, to accommodate on a 6-acre site what would have previously been accommodated on a 30-acre property. So some of the setbacks would be reduced. Some of the internal issues would be looked at differently. I will tell you that so far, there'll be no change in height, no change in density, no change in the kinds of uses, except that, you've heard me say this before, we have from the beginning thought that a commercial subset of uses on the subject Walters property, 1500 Pembroke Parkway, would not be appropriate, as appropriate as it was immediately adjacent to the Pembroke station. So commercial is not a part, use option is not a part of this particular application. We're still working on a draft. That draft will be polished, and it'll be for consideration before the Planning Commission, both county and local, in about a month's time. Do you want to add anything to what I said? No. I think the question was, what happens after 5 years? If we leave, right? Yes. Do you want to add to that?
Thank you. Let me say my name. Kim Crowder, Walters Group. So if the Walters Group was, if we were given permission to be able to move forward and build the building, and we built it, and people moved in, and we managed it, I just want to make sure I understand your question. It is, you're asking me what happens in 5 years if something happens to the Walters Group and we go away, but it's up and running. That's what you mean. Okay, so what would happen is, for those of you that have heard me speak before, we talked about an investor who we work with, and the investor puts a lot of money into the project, and the investors are the big banks like Citizens Bank, JP Morgan, PNC, the big banks. They put money into the project. If something happened to the Walters Group, they would replace us with a different property management company. The project stays the same. When the projects get built, there are deed restrictions that get placed on the property from the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency, as well as the Montgomery County Department of Housing and Community Development. And so there are deed restrictions on the property that restrict what the property can be used for. So it couldn't be changed. The use would have to be the same. And the deed restrictions from the state agency go for 35 years.
Okay.
So the use stays the same, the building stays the same. They would swap out the property manager. It would seem seamless. Nobody would be able to even tell even the people that live there would be seamless.
All right. I had another question. Megan, could you bring that community characteristics up? So when we're looking at this, I believe it was you, Kim, that said, when you delve too far into this, then things get really confusing.
Starts to
and
get
you
very confusing, yes.
Yes, I will agree with that. So if I understand this correctly, when I was explaining this to some residents, this is based on the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency, and they have set the median price range for Montgomery County at $105,400 median price range.
So $105,000 is the area median income. That means that if you took of every person that worked in the county and you took the median of the income that they earned, $105,000 a year is the median income.
Now, this data that I looked up was back from almost a year ago.
It published every year, roughly right around now.
So, all right, so I was looking, I didn't see any newer updates. So just so that I understand this correctly, the 15,820 for one bedroom at 20%, that is the median price range of between a one-person and a two-person income, correct? So if the one-person income is 14,760 and a two-person is 16,880,
It's roughly in the middle.
so that would be in the middle.
Yes.
And then,
So what happens is and anybody can look this up if you're interested in looking it up. I'd be happy to leave the information. If you want to put it on the website, I'd be happy to give it to you. You can pull it up.
I have it.
It's a big sheet that gets, it's really hard to see. You have to blow it up big if you, maybe you have, unless you have better eyes than me, but it shows exactly what the area median income is, and then it breaks up income based on the number of people that would be living in a unit, in an apartment. And so if there's one person, they're allowed to make this much. If there's two people, they're allowed to make this much. And that doesn't mean earners. That could be a single mom or dad with two kids or something like that. So it's the total number of the household. And so based on the number of people in the household, indicates what the income level would be for that household. It's based on this. That's why I started to say it starts to get confusing.
Yeah. So then the one bedroom, you said that that each bedroom could hold up to two people. So say it's just one person in there, in a one bedroom at the 20% level. That's $320 per month?
Yes, and so that $320 is the maximum that we are allowed to charge for rent. And then there is a utility allowance that is calculated based on what we would anticipate utilities to cost for an apartment, and that gets calculated into the same number. So there's rent and a utility allowance, and then the absolute maximum out of pocket for a family in a certain income category.
Okay.
Now we're starting to get confusing, so.
Yeah. No, just the way you summed it up, just with the 20% clears up all the rest for me. So I appreciate that. In our comp plan, since that's brought up a lot, there's on page 38, it says, housing prices and property values can fluctuate over time based on factors such as inflation, market conditions, and development trends. However, a home is typically considered affordable if the homeowner or resident's total housing costs do not exceed 30%. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, over 26% of Upper Gwynedd households have housing costs that are greater than 30%. A greater percentage of renter households, 39%, spend more than 30% of their household income on housing costs than do owner-occupied households. And it goes on and on, explaining more about the need at this time when the comp plan was written, what we have to consider here in Upper Gwynedd. The other question I
I
have.
would also suggest that by the time that was published, in the last 2 years, a considerable change has been happening across the rental market. And so rental prices and housing values in the last 24 to 36 months have skyrocketed.
The Martin track was brought up. That home is that 4-bedroom home on Allentown Road is for rent for $3,500 plus utilities. So it is. The population forecast, according to the comp plan, 2015 to 2045, according to the DVR-PC, the population is anticipated to increase by 2045 to 17,053. We're there already. So Upper Gwynedd is growing quicker, so we can't even look at some of these numbers. And in the, let's see, the other one was a lot of these surveys that we hear being brought up a lot about people like the community the way it is, and don't change it. I think what we need to keep in mind is that from October, let me get my notes here, from February 8th, 2019 through October 15th, 2019, 9 months, we just blasted out this survey, this online survey about the township for the comprehensive plan. We had 20 plus some people that sat on these boards going out asking people, take this survey, take this survey. I mean, I don't think there was anything more we could do to get this survey out to people. We got 397 responses, which is a little over 2.5% of the population at that time, which was 15,871. So I think when we hear that number that people are satisfied and happy, unfortunately, not enough people, only 2.5% of our population really was able to answer that. So a lot of the questions that I've been getting from people that I've met with, people that have called, it's been a lot, Kim. It really has, and I'm sure it has for all of us. It's that NIMBYism that was brought up. There's a lot that we still need to understand about this, and I thought we would have more questions tonight, besides the fact that we heard that people don't want it, but I've heard the opposite, and I'll tell you some of the things that I've heard. Senior citizens, older people want to downsize, but want to stay in Upper Gwynedd. And when they downsize, they want something smaller, but they don't want to go into an assisted living or something that's so regulated. They still want to be independent. So they asked to get on the list. I can share their name and number with you. Just kidding. No, I'm not saying this is happening. The other one was college kids, when they're right out of school, that they could live in there. And I know we've all worked hard to live here and have the things that we have. We all do have. But I guess something like this might give people, the break that we wish we all had, maybe. I have some more questions, but I think I got to organize them a little bit better. You'll be back in our June meeting?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Okay, I think we were on Van's report. Were there any other questions about Van's report? Okay, we will
Okay, thank you.
toss it over to Nick Cross from Remington Vernick Engineers.
Thanks, Sandra. There's just a couple of things to touch on tonight. One of the things is the ongoing stormwater projects in the township. I just wanted to highlight the 3 stages that we typically go through during all stormwater management projects. And those phases are, we start with design, we move on to construction, and then there's also verification. We've appreciated the patience of all of the residents and the adjacent property owners during construction. We're always in communication with the contractors to try to keep the project sites as tidy as possible. And then the final function, the verification, is very important to us as well. So even though the contractors might be off the project site, that doesn't mean that the project has been closed out. We always make sure that the projects are functioning in the way that they were designed, and we'll be working with the contractors to make sure that every time, this happens a lot with basins where they're constructed and then they're not infiltrating properly, and we make some changes to make sure that they're going to be infiltrating properly. And then the second thing I wanted to touch on was the 2023 road program. The construction is scheduled to start this year.
Nick, before you go into the second
sorry.
part, the verification, how long does that last? Like you said, if something that was to go wrong after the fact, how long does that verification?
It varies from project to project. Sometimes, like for a road program, for example, it's usually pretty quick. For the basins, sometimes it can take a little longer because we have to get the as-built from the contractors. We have to verify that everything was installed correctly. And then if everything's installed correctly, we have to make sure that all of the materials are, working correctly. So they can take, up to a month, maybe 2 months to fix in the end, but usually we try to minimize that.
Thank you.
And then the other option, or like I was saying, the road program will be starting on May 22nd. It's going to start with the 88 curb ramps and Broad Street. We will not be moving on to Hancock Street until after school's out, so there's no disruption there. And we will be making sure that all of the milling and the paving is completed before the end of the summer, so we're not interfering with the start of the school year as well.
Nick,
And-
I just have one question.
Okay.
Are it going to be done by the end of the summer, or is it going to carry over into September?
It will be done by the end of the summer, yes. And that's everything.
Thanks, Nick. For the board, items 12 and 13 and 14, I would all put onto the consent agenda. It's our staff departmental reports and the meeting minutes from April. I do want to point out in the Park and Rec report, it was a great report this month. I read it. It just is so full of what we provided to residents this spring as far as programming. It was really exciting to read. So if anyone hasn't read it, I recommend reading it. And Commissioner Hull, I have to pass it back to you for item 15, which is a decision item, but I will ask Nathan Crittenden, our finance director, to please come up to the podium while Denise kicks this off. Or maybe you'd just like Nathan to kick it off, Denise.
Oh, sure.
Okay. And this is a decision item for the board on item 15.
Good afternoon, or good evening at this point, Commissioner Hall and the rest of the commissioners. I appreciate you allowing me this opportunity. What we're talking about, what the staff was presenting this evening, is a software agreement with iSolved. What the software will entail is payroll. One of the things we looked at when we look at trying to save the township money is how much time and effort we are expending on different operations. One of those operations was payroll. Payroll takes up roughly about 15,000 man hours, or 1,500 man hours a year. The payroll process is now taking us 4.5 to 5 days, and it's every other week. So that's a lot of man hours that we could be recuperating back to get more things done during the day as we look to clean things up. One of the other things that's also included in this is a centralized HR processing. Right now, we're dividing up the roles between myself, Deanna, Patty, and then each department has to kind of manage some of this information on their own. We're looking to centralize that and to make it more accessible when we need it, and to look at the overall package. The thing I liked about iSolved, we looked at a couple different companies when we put this out. Not a lot of people target the municipal space. We have a very specialized payroll, which is why some of the smaller municipalities will bring it in-house and do it that way. There are a lot of nuances that come with, especially working with bargaining agreements, specialized pays, specialized tax rulings, especially when you're talking about your uniformed staff. So when we looked at that, we reached out to a few other municipalities, and they recognized NCR, who used to be JetPay, as being very reliable. They have now become iSolved. They've grown a little bit, but as well they focus on the Pennsylvania municipal space, and with that being the case, they're able to offer the services at a reasonable price. What we're requesting at this time will be the $6,852. That would be for the one-time implementation fee. So what they do is they come in, they take a look at the way our operation runs. They program based on how our operation needs to run and efficiently, so it does not go outside of the way we're currently operating in our practices. They also do the implementation phase of importing a lot of that data, so it saves us when should we elect to move forward with this. For instance, Deanna, myself, or Patty would have to spend time scanning all this information in. This would also allow us to go green and keep us a little bit more paperless while securing that information. So we're following all of our regulations as required by a lot of our insurance companies and how we secure our data and encrypt it. So that's what that fee would entail. And the annual cost is based on our employees. So if our employees go up, the cost does go up, but it keeps it menial. At the same time, if our employees go down, we end up saving more money. When we took a look at what would be the cost of either adding another member to finance to try to handle this process, or what time we spend around the different departments. So you're talking about a member of the police department, public works, wastewater, admin staff. When you take a look at those different salaries, you're roughly talking about a savings of about $160,000 a year. So I would like to offer this as a decision to the board when we take a look at how many man hours we're getting back and where we can replace them for $22,000 a year.
Nate, I have a question for you.
Yes, ma'am.
So the yearly fee, once this is installed and it's tested, it's up and it's running,
Mhm.
then does that yearly fee also include the cost of any kind of upgrades to the system, the testing of it, and the maintenance and troubleshooting?
Yes, ma'am. And we have access to 2,000 employees. We're also issued a specific or designated HR department. What they will also entail is training each employee on a one-on-one basis. If we have employees change out moving forward, they will also come back and retrain.
Oh, so it does include the training also then?
Does include the training. And
Do you have
then
an administrator that we have to train here on site, or are they the administrator?
so they will be the administrator, but we also have on-site administrators as well, basically. And the thing I do like about this is they keep the system separate. Again, there's certain information that everybody should not have access to.
That's firewalled off of everything else?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
That's great, Nate. Thank you. That was very informative and that was very thorough. We really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Do we have a motion to approve authorization for township staff to enter into a 24-month agreement with iSolved in the amount of $22,444.80 per year for payroll and workforce management services and spending in the amount of $6,852.40 for initial implementation?
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any board comments? Oh, go ahead, Catherine.
I have a question. So the two amounts, what are we're agreeing to the 22,000 per year and the
Yes,
6,000?
the 6,800 is a one-time fee just for the startup this year.
And this is a 2-year agreement? You said 24?
Yes.
24 months.
Yep.
So it'll be just the 20, so if we don't like it, is what I'm getting at. We only have a contract for 2 years, is that,
Sorry, Nate, I thought we were done.
I didn't think about it until Martha had
okay.
her question.
All right. It's
Until
okay.
Martha had her question.
No worries. So the 24-month agreement locks it in so that we are secure that rate.
Okay.
But we, as a township, if we decide we do not like it or do not want it, I had them put in a clause so that we do not pay a fee.
I didn't understand. Would you say?
We don't
that?
pay an additional fee. So say after 12 months, you decide, hey, this just isn't for our township,
Oh, okay.
we can get out of the contract and there's no additional fee for us
Without penalty?
without penalty.
Okay.
Just like to announce that if you have to buy a new car, Nate is the person to take with you. He is constantly asking for vendors to do better, and it really works out well for the taxpayer.
Okay. Thank you.
Got to be in charge of our finances. Thank you. Do we have any public comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much. Our finance department, as you all know, handles the fire department's finances, as well as the pool finances, as well as the township's finances, as well as the Upper Gwynedd Community Association's finances, as well as the Industrial Development Authority finances for the township. So I was not making up that super long list. Those are all the things that our 3 staff members handle, 3.5. And making this decision will make a huge difference for our operations. So I personally want to thank the board for that. Moving on to item 16. This is the approval of the Second Amendment to the Standard Lease Agreement between Upper Gwynedd Township and Unisite. Megan, were you going to handle this one?
Yes. So we're looking to make an amendment to our current lease agreement with Unisite. Unisite leases a portion of our property for the telecommunications tower that's in the rear of our property. So we do have an easement that runs down, well, it's the right-of-way that runs down Parkside Place, and then it goes back through our parking lot, right in front of all the police vehicles, and then down through the Public Works yard to the tower. So they are looking to add additional wiring, so they would have to dig up our parking lot to be able to install this additional infrastructure. So we are working with them to but to have an additional easement area that would run from the grassy area in between the paved parking lot, our parking lot over here, and the pool parking lot. So that would create minimal disturbance to our township operations. So we're looking to add that easement as part of this lease agreement, but it would require that we make that amendment.
And that's for the board's decision not next week, on the 22nd. Okay. And item 17 is a decision item. Commissioner Hall?
Thank you. Next, we have the proclamation recognizing the month of May as Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month in Upper Gwynedd Township. So I'll start with reading the proclamation. Whereas Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month in the United States was celebrated beginning in 1978 and was made into a month-long event in 1992 to honor and recognize the contributions and achievements of residents of Asia and the Pacific Islands. And whereas Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders have been part of the history of the United States of America for over 200 years, contributing to the economy, culture, education, politics, arts, literacy, science, and technological developments, despite institutional and systemic injustices designed to prevent and limit these achievements and contributions. And whereas Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders were integral in the building of the Transcontinental Railroad, working in coal and gold mines and farming, while subjected to unjust working conditions, prejudice, and discrimination. And whereas, even in the darkness of the Exclusion Act and Japanese internment, Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders persevered, providing for their families and creating opportunities for their children. And whereas diversity represents one of our greatest strengths, and by recognizing the contributions and accomplishments of Asian American and Pacific Islander men and women, our township celebrates the importance of inclusion to building a brighter future for all of our citizens. And whereas today more than 20 million Asian American Pacific Islanders live in the United States, and through their actions make America a more vibrant, prosperous, and secure nation. Now therefore be it proclaimed that the Board of Commissioners do hereby designate the month of May be set aside as Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month in Upper Gwynedd Township, proclaimed this 9th day of May, 2023. Do we have a motion to approve the proclamation for Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month?
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any board comments? Do we have any public comments? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. And for the board's consideration at the meeting on the 22nd, you will also be approving the proclamation or considering the approval of the proclamation for Pride Month, as well as the proclamation for Juneteenth, which are both available via the links on this agenda, if anyone would like to read them in advance of that meeting. Moving on, Commissioner Carter has nothing in her section this month. Commissioner Damsker's section, we do have a decision item, pretty typical decision item for a MERC waiver request, so.
That's item 20 on the agenda. It's a motion to ratify the MERC waiver request from chapter 113-1 and 124-5 for Sunday work hours to install a replacement fire water line for the campus. Sunday work beginning on April 16th through May 28th, 2023, from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m.
So we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any board comments? Do we have any public comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Then there's 21.
And then Ruth, we're going to give it back to Sandra.
Okay.
Okay, so item 21 is the final escrow release, which we don't have linked yet. Sometimes this happens when at work session, we're still working to gather the information, but we think we'll have it ready for you on the 22nd. So that'll be up for your consideration then. And you know what, I was going to ask for that to be on the consent agenda, but I won't since we're not going to be discussing it much further tonight. There's also the approval of an encroachment agreement for 524 Sumneytown Pike's ultimate right-of-way, which this is another sort of typical thing that the board hears, and it's for a fence permit to install around an applicant's property. We are also looking for the approval of an escrow release for Roosevelt Court. Both items 22 and 23 are ripe for the consent agenda. And are there any questions? Moving along to Commissioner McNaney's section. Item 24, I'm going to ask to put on the consent agenda as well. That is a 5K race being held by the YMCA on September 23rd. All of the information's in the packet, and it's been reviewed by our Park and Rec Department and our Police Department. Again, item 25, we are still looking to finalize some information on our microsurfacing project. The board, you'll be getting invitations from me in the next week or so to go on a little field trip with Willard and I, or you can do your own field trip to review a new type, well, it's not that new, but a different type of microsurfacing product, which is more expensive, but does produce less pebbles, less roadway grit, and adheres to the roadway just a bit better, so, and seals it up. Do you like that technical description of NovaChip? Very technical.
That's
Yes.
great, though, because those are the complaints that we
Yes,
consistently
so
get about
Willard
it.
took me
Even
on
though
a
it
field
preserves
trip
the road.
over
we
to
still get
Lansdale
those
Borough,
complaints.
and I saw the NovaChip that just got done about a month ago, and I was like, holy moly, this looks much better than the typical RaluMac process that we utilize. And it is widely utilized, not just by Lansdale. Willard was telling me Gwynedd Township uses it, and quite a few others, which I'm sure Nick could share with us. So I'm going to ask, I'll send you guys the streets that were just done in Lansdale. That's the closest place to go and view them. You can
That's
go
great.
and check it out on your own.
Excellent.
Okay, so wow, we have another string of decision items. It is grant season. Nick made the best Gantt chart. I love a good Gantt chart. And we have a very organized process here, thanks to Nick, on our whole grant outlook for the whole year. And the 27 and 28 will be about that. But first, for item 26, we handle the Montgomery County Consortium bid for heating fuel. We've done that the last couple of years, and we are asking for approval to advertise the bid documents.
Great. Do we have a motion to approve the advertisement of the bid for number 2 heating oil for the participating members of the Montgomery County Municipal Managers Consortium?
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any board comments? Do we have any public comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Oh, going. Did you have anything else you wanted to say about those?
I just want to say about the next one, because I'm super excited. It's really hard to get money with no matching funds, but we did it. Congratulations, RVE, for their awesome grant writing. The local share grant that we're asking for approval for signature of the agreement was for $580,000 of construction dollars that we don't have to provide any match for.
Keep up the
Excellent.
good work.
Do we,
About $2.4 million have been brought in grant dollars over the past 2 years. Sorry, I just wrote an article for the Gazette. I gave you a little preview about how much has been brought in the past 2 years to Upper Gwynedd in grant funding.
that's amazing. Do we have a motion to approve the grant agreement authorizing the local share assessment grant of $580,852 from the Commonwealth Financing Authority for the Haynes Run project?
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any board comments? Do we have any public comments? All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Okay, item 28, I'm going to ask for some input from Nick on. Hopefully Isaac prepped you on that. I did talk to him today about it. So in Upper Gwynedd Township, I'm going to try to speak about this in the least confusing way possible, but we have 2 bridges on Sumney Town Pike. One bridge, it's a county bridge, and it crosses the Towmenson Creek. That's the bridge that is just below the Weiss Shopping Center. Then we have the bridge that crosses the Wissahickon on Sumney Town Pike just by Boston Style Pizza, where we also have a pedestrian bridge. So the pedestrian bridge that's located there has been there for a little while, and as you know, we're replacing that bridge due to wear and tear on the scour, and it needs an upgrade. In that process, this is the part that you can talk about probably more eloquently than I. There have been some challenges with keeping 2 bridges there. Since we are replacing the bridge, we wanted to incorporate it into just one bridge instead of having 2 separate bridge structures there spanning the creek. And so that was initially part of our plan to consider, should we keep the pedestrian bridge? Should we get rid of the pedestrian bridge? But we are able to incorporate pedestrian walkways and 10-foot walking trail on the bridge. It would just be included on the new bridge instead of being a separate second bridge, which then sort of frees up that pedestrian bridge to be moved up the road, up Sumney Town Pike, to the bridge that crosses the Towmenson Creek.
Stop for a second.
Sure.
Everybody following along? So it's the bridge by the Boston Style Market, that pedestrian bridge. We were proposing to move that bridge, just pick it up, move it down, move it up the road by Weiss's Market on the same side as Weiss. But just down at the hill there, there's where like the car wash is, not where the car wash is, because there's no sidewalk connection there. So you see a lot of people walking, high school kids walking down in the roadway there, and they've requested sidewalks, but it's really difficult to put sidewalks in because it's a bridge and all of that. So that pedestrian bridge by Boston Style will fit perfectly up there. Is that right? So it's the Wissahickon Bridge, we call it, by the Boston Style, and it's the Towmenson Bridge because it crosses the Towmenson Creek. Okay.
Now, Nick, tell us about why it will be better for our new bridge to be constructed with the walking, without a second pedestrian bridge.
So essentially, the existing bridge is going to, the new bridge is going to be wider, and it'll have, sidewalk on either side of it. You've probably crossed bridges like that before, rather than having the second bridge, which, you'd have to walk around to be able to get over it. And now, instead of paying the demolition costs to get rid of that bridge or dispose of it, and then the installation and design costs of the new bridge over the Towmenson, we'll be able to kind of recycle that first pedestrian bridge over to the Towmenson and get, 2 bridges for, I don't want to say the cost of one, but much cheaper than you would if you were to demolish the one and install a new.
Additionally, when I spoke with Isaac this afternoon, one of the other reasons is the current bridge has an issue with the scour because of the way the creek hits the bridge and the curves in the creek. So reducing any further obstruction to the creek there by having 2 bridges instead of 1 will also hopefully help the longevity of our bridge over the Wissahickon. Now, I'm sure the next question on everyone's mind is how much will this all cost? And we have a cost estimate of $655,000, including engineering that Nick and Isaac's firm put together. So we will continue, I think, on Nick's grant chart. There is definitely some grant applications in the future for this pedestrian connection. It's very strong grant application. It would be because that pedestrian connection is highlighted in our comp plan as a important connection, as Commissioner McNaney mentioned earlier, in that it allows for a major connection from every other part of Sumneytown Pike up to that shopping center and beyond. So tonight, we're looking for, sorry to interrupt you, just permission to move forward with the engineering work associated because we are deep in the engineering of the Wissahickon Creek Bridge. We don't want to be doing two engineering processes. We're trying to keep this cost efficient and engineer everything at once, as well as have the construction cited at one time instead of two separate times. So we're already mobilized and ready to go.
Okay. So bottom line is you're going to repurpose the pedestrian bridge from the Boston Market Creek to the Weiss Creek.
Sure, if you prefer to refer to it that way, that is perfectly fine. I can understand why that would be more memorable.
Yes.
Yes. We like to speak in terms of maps, so
Well, for the regular
landmarks
people,
work as well.
yeah, regular people out here.
Yeah, I know.
We're going from Boston to Weiss.
Yes.
Gotcha.
I have another reason why we should do this on behalf of the residents of Gwynedd. So back in 1987, when David Cutler was getting the land approval for that development of Gwynedd, he promised the residents that he would build a bridge over the creek so that they could get over the creek safely. Now, this was before Weiss had any sidewalks. There was no sidewalks, but there was that creek. And by the time, this was in 1987, that was the planning stage. By the time it got to the maintenance agreement in 1994, the then manager, Len Perrone, had decided with the chief of police at the time, Bill, did I pronounce his name right? Bill, that it would be unsafe to build a bridge to nowhere there because the grading was so severe that they thought it wouldn't be safe. So David Cutler said, great, how about I give you $15,000 for your capital plan in lieu of that? The township said, fantastic. But he neglected to mention that to the residents of Gwynedd. So in 1996, a rather large group of residents came to the public meeting and said, where's our bridge? David Cutler said he gave you the money, you would be building the bridge. And the manager that time, Len Perrone, said, oh, I'm sorry, it would be a bridge to nowhere, it would be unsafe, we can't do that. And that was the last that was heard of that issue. So way back when, 30 years ago, we did receive $15,000 to build the bridge. How crazy that that seemed like enough money to build a bridge.
It may have been enough at that time, I'm not sure.
Yes.
But now there are tons more requirements probably. And, you know, pedestrian bridges are shockingly expensive. I don't know how much the initial bridge was. It was probably very expensive, but I don't think I've ever been part of a construction project where a pedestrian bridge costs less than $500,000 or $1 million.
Yeah,
They're usually
very,
like,
very
yeah.
How old is that bridge?
The pedestrian bridge, I think it's 10 to 15 years old if I think it was.
I would have to check.
Yeah,
All right.
we'll have to check into
Yeah.
that, but it's got a long life ahead of it. That's why, just so you know, the other option would be to possibly, you know, sell that bridge to like another municipality or something instead of spending this money. But because we do have it outlined in our comp plan as a priority location, it seems like a good idea to bring it before the board for consideration. So as I mentioned, we are looking for, sorry, it's so hard to speak when there's chatter in the audience. At this time, we're looking for the cost of the engineering, just a consensus from the board to be able to begin the engineering work on the project, which is $168,762. And you might ask me, Sandra, where are we going to get $168,000? I will tell you that the $580,000 grant that you just approved signing, that work was planned to be paid for by our capital plan. Now the grant is paying for it, so we have money available to other new projects.
Great. Do we have a motion to begin the project engineering for the pedestrian bridge location project?
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any board comments? Do we have any public comments? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Okay, moving right along. Nick was speaking earlier about the basin projects and how they can take a little longer than we might expect sometimes due to all the due diligence engineering has to do. And they're asking us to approve payment number 2 for the Newport Lane Basin retrofit, and that would be a consent item for the 22nd. Our Park and Rec Department is looking for the purchase of a zero-turn mower. This was budgeted for in our 2023 capital plan and is coming in under budget by about $4,000. Any questions about that? It's also replacing, I think, a 2010 mower.
Wow.
We also, you heard Van speak earlier about the LED marquee board. We got approval from the zoning hearing board, which is wonderful. And now Sarah would like to move forward, which you can see got here. Isaac Caker, our previous Park and Rec director, left, and I had to learn how to operate the DOS software, the programs that sign out there. It's like you have to do exclamation point, whatever you're going to write. It's crazy. So Sarah's been programming with that for 4 years, and I think this will be a major upgrade to the messages that we can share with our community. Megan has a picture of it up in the screen. Are there any questions about that? Okay, and grants that we will be working on as staff in the month of May. We are looking to apply for a grant to the CFA Greenways, Trails, and Recreation Program in the amount of $250,000 for our castle refurbishment project. As everyone knows, the castle is 25 plus years old and is made of wood. So at some point we have to make sure that it's upgraded just to stay compliant with safety regulations. Last year, when we were considering what we would be looking forward to in the future for this refurbishment, it was around $1 million that we estimated. The good news is I think it's going to be less than that, closer to maybe $580,000. We've got a report from the playground company that reviews these types of wooden structures. And that is why we're applying for a grant for $250,000, which is a 15% matching program to look for that grant funding. Any questions? Okay, we are also looking for funding. These next two, 33 and 34, it's the same project, but 2 different funding sources. And this is our Jacks Lane Stream Bank Restoration Project. Last year, we did some major work in our open space areas, cleaning them up and making sure that all the dead trees and brush was cleared. And as a result of doing that, we noticed the severely eroded stream bank at Jacks Lane. At the same time, we were also looking for a project for our MS4 requirements, where our TMDL plan are required to do a certain number of projects to reduce sediment in the stream. And this project is in the skipback, which, as everyone may recall, we did a huge restoration project in the Wissahickon a couple years ago, an award-winning project. We have the Haynes Run in the Wissahickon watershed planned. This is now in the skipback watershed and would satisfy those requirements by the DEP. So we will be looking for grant funding in the amount of $63,000 for the engineering and some planning funds from the CFA Flood Mitigation Grant Program, and then $300,000, which also includes design and construction from the CFA Watershed Restoration and Protection Program. They have so many programs. We are going to apply for all of them. Are there any questions about those projects? And just a note that these are future planned projects. They're not exactly imminent. There's time that we can take in engineering and planning.
Great.
Items, I don't know if I said this before, 29, 32, 33, and 34 will be going on the consent agenda. Commissioner Similaro's section about wastewater. We have a addendum number 1 to the sewage facilities construction, operation, and maintenance reimbursement agreement with Merck. Take it away, Megan.
So the township previously had an agreement with Merck from 2011, and this agreement was essentially at Merck's cost. They were installing a pump station for their operations, and the township would operate and maintain that. So the agreement was for a 10-year period, and Merck had agreed to reimburse us reasonable costs that we incurred for maintaining, operating, and repairing that. So that has expired, that agreement. So we are looking to extend that agreement for another 10-year period. And the only substantial change to that is just an updated cost schedule for the next 10 years.
Thanks, Megan. Any questions about that? Okay. Lastly, we will be looking on the 22nd for approval to purchase wiper cylinders and sensor assemblies from Trojan Technologies. These are parts that are part of our UV system at the wastewater plant. And that's something that was also budgeted for this year. And then there will just be the open and paid invoices, and that is all I have for the board.
Great. Thank you, Sandra. Does anyone else on the board have anything else?
Yes.
Yes. Oh, well, Liz was first. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. All right, I was going to ask, I forgot a question for Kim. Sorry, I'm glad you stayed around. See, I made it worth your while. The layout of these buildings, so there'll be 2 stories, but like on the bottom floor could be a 1-bedroom, and then the second floor could be a 3-bedroom. Is that right? Or how will that?
They're
2
called
stories.
stacked flats.
Okay.
So it can work like that. And they're really 2.5. Some of them can be 2.5 stories. So like the 3-bedroom units, which there are not very many, but the 3-bedroom units are probably 2 bedrooms on 1 floor. And then you go to a second floor with a pitched roof for like a 3rd bedroom.
Okay. I forgot to ask. That was the only one. That was my last one.
Predominantly, they're two floors.
2 floors. Okay.
But like the ends where the gable roof is.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a public service announcement for everyone to please check out the Upper Gwynedd Township Fire Department's Facebook page. They have 2 upcoming fundraisers. Quizzo Night on Friday, May 19th. Doors open up at 7. Again, they're Quizzo Night, Friday, May 19th. And then in July, they have a golf tournament coming up on Monday, July 17th. So please check out the Upper Gwynedd Township Fire Department's Facebook page for further information.
Excellent. Anybody else? All right. Thank you so much for coming this evening. Meeting is adjourned.